Hi, Andrew. Great to have you with us. Please do tell us a little bit about your background and how you heard about us and what do you have going on? Why are you interested in expatriation?
Alec, first and foremost, thank you for having me here on your channel. It means a great deal to me. We've been doing business together for, I want to say, the better portion of a year now. I am, of course, an administrative professional in the higher education realm. I've been working here in higher education in the United States for the last 13 years. As you can imagine, over the course of the last decade, I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of ups and downs. And as somebody who was born and raised here in the United States, from the very early 90s up until today, I can tell you that there's been a lot of changes, not only from a career standpoint that I've been addressing over the last couple of years, but also just from a social standpoint. So one of the things that I'm focused on, one of the things that I'm big on, as you're probably aware, Al, is I'm all about emergency preparedness. What that means in the terms of emergency preparedness is in terms and how that relates to expatriation is as follows. In the preparedness community, there is a big emphasis on this aspect of bugging out. For members of your audience who are unaware, bugging out is simply leaving your primary home location. If we look at what's taken place from a social and a political standpoint here in the United States over the last 10 years, things have become less stable. Over the last 5 years specifically, we've seen for the first time since I've been alive, people becoming politically, we've seen a lot of social unrest as a result of election results. Those are all signs of political instability. Those are not things people rioting over election results. That is not something that I grew up with here in the United States. These are all signs of a decline, so to speak. And so the reason why I'm interested in expatriation, the reason why it is that I've gone ahead and partnered with you and your team to go ahead and focus on this is not so much for the purpose of leaving the United States right now necessarily. It's been for the purpose of coming up with a plan and coming up with a plan, having a plan for leaving the United States if I need to at a moment's notice. That's just part of being well prepared. So really, that's why I've made use of the services. And so far, the services have been outstanding.
And tell us a little bit about the value that you found in our services. There are many different expat relocation services. Why us? What have you found?
So first and foremost, you have outstanding communication. From the very first time that I reached out to you, I knew right away that I was dealing with a singular point of contact, a singular human being that had all of the say as to how this business would be conducted. So with a lot of business, just to give your audience more of an understanding of what I do, I won't get into too many specifics, but I work in higher education, but I work specifically in sales and recruiting. So I understand in terms of sales how much of an emphasis there is in making sure that there is clear, timely communication with the customer. I have never had an issue getting a quick, timely, accurate response from you and or members of your staff. Two, you all have done an outstanding job of really taking all of the legwork away from me and just allowing me to go ahead and reap the rewards of your services. To give your audience a better understanding of what I'm talking about, I met with you initially. We had a meeting and I told you about what it is that I'm looking for specifically. You used that meeting that we had. You used that information that I provided you with to come up with a checklist, a criteria, a series of points that you would use to go ahead and find a location abroad for me that would be a good fit for my personality and a good fit for my goals and objectives in terms of expatriation. You sent that list to me. You made sure that the list was correct, that you made sure that all of the points that I stressed in our meeting were being reflected there in those points that you were looking for, that criteria. And you used that to very quickly identify a location abroad that would allow me to go ahead and leave the United States and to really live, achieve, acquire, whatever you want to call it, the lifestyle that I'm looking for if indeed I do leave the US. So that was outstanding. It took all of the background research away from me. It allowed me to just go ahead and provide you with what I was looking for. And to you and for you and your staff to really go ahead and do all of the research and really come to that final destination.
And if you don't mind, please do share this final destination and why it suits your preferences.
Yeah, so one of the things that you all did for me, among the whole, you provided a whole gambit of services in this, but one of the primary things that you and your staff did was provide an ideal location for me, and that is Cebu in the Philippines. The reason why it is that that's such a good location for me is because again, it matched all of my criteria points. I was looking for a place that had a certain value set. I was looking for a place that was going to allow me to go ahead and to leave the United States, but to still live among a group of people that spoke a different language, but also spoke English. So there's a very heavy expat community there in the Philippines. So as I assimilate into the culture, I have the option to go ahead and still communicate with people in English who share a similar set of cultural beliefs, moral beliefs, whatever it is that you want to call it. The weather also matches my preferences as somebody who's grown up and lived in South Texas their whole life. Being able to move to a location that matches all of those criteria, but also has a warmer climate, that was important to me. Also, what you and your staff did is you identified a location abroad that matched all of those criteria points that I provided you with, and still allowed me to have a lot of buying power with the US dollar. And that was very important to me as well.
See, that's the idea. America is now a great place to earn a living still, but not such a great place to live. And see, you identified the many ways in which the American culture does not really fit you anymore. And I've helped you see where you might feel at home, and that's the Philippines. And if you don't mind, could you go into a little detail as to why you tend to prefer the Filipino culture to the American culture? What's there for you?
Yeah, so like everything else in life, a lot of where people are going to move to is going to be a matter of personal preference, but a lot of it's also going to be a matter of values, your typical moral code, your particular sense of values. So the Filipino culture has what you might describe as a more traditional, more conservative set of values. For me, that was important because with that comes a great deal of social stability. Social stability is really the reason why it is that I'm having this discussion with you in the first place. And it's really the reason why it is that I reached out to you all of those months ago. And that's because at the end of the day, as we're planning for retirement, if we're perhaps considering moving abroad to enjoy our retirement, or if we're planning to go ahead and move here in the immediate future, one of the things that I think most people are going to be looking for is a culture that has a tremendous amount of stability. We're looking for safety and security. So for me, the Philippines was an ideal location for that, in addition to all of the other characteristics of that geographic area that you've identified for me.
Yeah, and see, now is a great time to be thinking about stability. Now, whether you like Donald Trump, whether you love him or you hate him, he is an agent of chaos, one way or the other. He is not a man of the system. He will turn it upside down, for better or for worse. And his tariff policy, well, that might raise inflation. And it might raise the purchasing power of the dollar abroad. In fact, I had Professor Keith Preston on the show the other day where we talked about that exactly. That a lot of Trump's economic policies may be inflationary in the United States itself, but deflationary abroad. That if Trump wants to limit the supply of U.S. dollars abroad, the dollar will become more scarce and therefore more valuable and therefore stronger against foreign currencies. For instance, and now I see that a dollar is worth 6.2 Brazilian reals. When I lived in Brazil, it was usually about 5, maybe a little less. So the dollar is picking up steam, and it will continue to pick up steam abroad. But, if Donald Trump really proceeds to deport immigrants as he says he will, well, that will shrink the labor supply, the supply of the labor pool. That will make labor more expensive. The cost will be passed down to the consumer. If he erects tariffs foreign products to become more expensive in the United States. So if you were living in the US, you're going to end up paying more for everything and less for everything if you live abroad, because the dollar will outperform the BRICS currencies. The dollar will close the gap with the pound and with the euro. So this is a great time to be thinking about relocating. Now, Andrew, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Do you have any closing thoughts, any questions?
Yeah, no, just a couple of closing thoughts to those in the community that are considering potentially leaving the U.S. One of the conversations that you and I had, Alec, had early on was the fact that we tend to start thinking in terms of totality. If I'm going to go ahead and expatriate, if I'm going to go ahead and leave the United States, I'm doing so forever. I just want to make members of this community aware of the fact that that's not necessarily the case. If we're talking about things like avoiding some social upheaval, if we're talking about avoiding potentially precarious situations, leaving the U.S. may just be a temporary endeavor. And if that's the case, Alec, you are the man to talk to. And I just want to make that very apparent to your audience. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. We'll talk again soon.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and you'll be hearing from us again.